So welcome to a new guide on this channel, and this occasion is the MAI TAI from Studio One. Now this is not a review, it's a deep dive guide about this synth. Now everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. If you like this guide, like and subscribe, and if you have the money, you can buy me a coffee. Everything is on the description. So you have two oscillators, oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, and for now we're going to take a look at the oscillator number 1 because it's pretty much the same as oscillator number 2. There are a couple of differences, but we are going to be talking about that in a minute. Alright, so I need to cover kind of pretty much everything because maybe you're starting on synthesis and you want to learn everything about the synth and you don't know where to start. Well, I'm going to be covering everything, so this is kind of a beginner's course, pretty much. So you get your oscillator number 1. By default, you get a sound, but if you click right here, you're going to be turning off and on. Right, you're going to be standing on range. This is your octave control, your range control. You go to 8, you can go lower octave, lower, or go higher, and then go higher. You get your semi, which is going to be by semitones. You're going to be detuning by semitones, and you can go all the way up to 11 on all the way down to -11. Right, pretty simple so far. So the other thing that you're going to have is the fine tune. So this one is going to make it flat, or it's going to make it sharp. It's going to be flat, sharp, or flat. And you have all the in-betweens right here. So by holding the command or the alt on the on Windows, and if you click it, you always go back to the default value. Then you have your pan control, pretty easy, go to the left, or we can go all the way to the right. It's pretty simple. So then we have more dedicated controls. In this case, you get a sub. Now, the vibe of this synthesizer sometimes is kind of a combination between modern and vintage and analog gear. So some features are going to be very kind of analog, and some features are going to be super modern. And one of the things that you get is a sub, the ability to add a sub to the oscillator. And this is a different waveform that is going to be added as a sub. Notice that we are kind of turning this saw, and we have a rounded spot, so we have a sub. It's going to be a sine. So the sub would always play 1 octave lower from where you're standing. So if you're on 8, the sub is going to be playing on 16, and so on and on and on. So it's just a sub, something very common we have on some synthesizers, not all the synthesizers. And since this is a synthesizer, you get different waveforms. You get your saw, then you have your sine wave, and then you have your triangle, and then the pulse width, which is going to be the square. And this one, you can do pulse width modulation. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So with most synthesizers where you have many voices, just like this one, notice that if we go right here, we can decide how many voices we have. What we can do unison. And the way we do unison on this one is very particular. We have a knob right here that is called spread. And this one, what it will do, it will kind of grab these voices and just kind of duplicate it or stack the voices on top of each other. Right now, I'm playing one key. So if I play one key and we go up on this spread, we're going to start listening more things. And we're going to hear that the sound goes super wide. Now, if you don't know how unison works, pretty much what we are doing, we are grabbing voices and we are stacking them on top of each other. So it's like we press one key, while in the background, you're holding 8 keys with the same, in this case, the same value. So when we stack on top of each other, all the voices, we are going to have this big sound. Now, the thing is that when the voices are starting or are equally or maybe the same voices are just the same, it's going to sound a little bit phasey. That's why when we play something and I use the spread, notice that right here we get something, but it's not something cool. It's not something super wide or big. And as you go up, what we are doing, we are detuning the voices. And we are kind of offsetting them. So when we offset them, they're going to be starting to separate, and we are going to get the big sound, the unison sound. Right. So the random phase, what it does is you can play multiple voices. It will alter the phase of the other voices. They're going to be starting on a random place. That's why it's called random phase. So right now we had one voice, but if I start playing many, now this is on, I'm going to be turning it off. It sounds a little bit phasey, right? It just sounds different. So it means that when you start playing an oscillator, that oscillator will start with this kind of from this place, let's say, this place right here. So the other voice will pretty much start the same way, especially when you use Unison. So the random phase is going to kind of force the other oscillators to start on a different phase, on a different position on the phase, on a random phase. So this is going to help you when you're using multiple voices or even when you're doing Unison. If I go maybe right here and I turn this on, notice that it sounds a little bit different. If I turn this on, we can get a different sound because, the phase is different. So the waveforms will interact on a different way. Right? So it depends on what you want to do. In my case, I much prefer to keep this one always on because it's more kind of closer to analog. And again, this is the vibe of the synthesizer, trying to emulate analog. So that's pretty much it. You get your spread, your sub, your level, and just, with this and the other oscillator, you can create great sounds. So the next thing is going to be the pulse width modulation, or pulse width actually. With all the different waveforms, we don't have access to pulse width, and it's something very analog. On the digital world with other synthesizers, we can pretty much alter the pulse width of everything, or the width of everything. But on the old school kind of analog synthesizers, you cannot do this. You can only do it on this one, on the square or pulse. So when you go to this one gets available only there. You cannot do it for the other ones. So if you're wondering what this is, if I go all the way down and I play something, what we are doing, we are altering the width of the pulse. So it's super narrow and we cannot pretty much not hear it. We just, there's nothing. And I'm playing something right now. And as I go up, that is super narrow. So this one will alter the width of the pulse. It's just a pretty standard control, but maybe you're starting and you're saying, oh, okay, so, that's pulse width. No. And you can see it right here. It says PW, so it's pulse width. Now the M is called, it means modulation. So it means that you can modulate this control up and down, or in the way, whatever the way you want, to alter the width, and you're going to get this very common sound, very analog sound. Now of course to kind of modulate this on a different way with an LFO or something else, we need to talk about the matrix that you have right here at the bottom, but we're going to be discussing that in a couple of minutes. But right now, what you can do, you can play select the pulse, and you just can select maybe a pulse and then do a combination with the other one, right? Maybe play this and go lower and do a sub. And notice that you cannot do Unison, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. Let's do a spread on this one. And of course, that's too much. Right, so we know everything we can do with the oscillator number 1. Let's talk about the oscillator number 2. It's going to be very simple because we can do pretty much the same thing. There are some differences, like we cannot do spread on the oscillator number 2. So everything else is just pretty much the same, but we cannot do spread. Now what we can do is oscillator sync. Now if you don't know what oscillator sync is, you can go to YouTube or the web and just type oscillator sync, and you will find very detailed information of how that works. So in this case, I'm just going to give you a very short explanation of how this works. So how this works is that when we sync it, the oscillator number 2 will be forced to restart its frequency following the oscillator number 1 frequency. So this one is going to be called a master, and the oscillator number 2 is going to be called slave. So let me just give you a kind of a brief example. If I play something, we are getting both oscillators, and we can hear them, right? So if I detune this one, we can hear that we are just detuning by some amount, and we hear, that it's just, a little bit detuned. But when I sync it, that doesn't happen. What we get this kind of a bassy, kind of a hard sync kind of a sound. And as we move this one, or we separate it, we're going to start getting different colors, different tones. So that's how oscillator sync works. It cannot go out of tune because this is the slave of the number 1. If this one, we change the the tune of this one, the second one will follow it. But remember that the number 1 now is the master and the second one is the slave. Now still, we can just turn off this one and notice that we are just not going out of tune, and how the shape, looks, it looks very different. And it's because we are, this one is the slave. Now, when you do oscillator sync, by default, it doesn't sound very good, especially if you combine oscillators, you combine them, and it's because you have the same waveform, you're standing on the same range, you're just doing the same. Oscillator sync, it's really cool when you start to modulate the pitch of the oscillator number 2 in some fashion, and when you separate the oscillators maybe just a little bit. In this case, for now, I'm just gonna turn it off, and if I modulate this manually, notice that we get kind of something kind of a modulation, and we get a cool sound. Now, instead of doing this manually, what you could do, you could use the envelopes and do a modulation right here. I'm going to do it really quickly so I can show you how this kind of a sounds. I'm going to select whatever of the places we have to do modulations. In this case, I'm going to use the envelope 2, which is going to be this one. And then I'm going to go right here. I'm going to say, okay, so I want to modulate the pitch of the oscillator number 2. And this is something very common with, oscillator sync. So now what we are doing is modulating the pitch with an envelope. Right now, nothing is going to happen because we need to do something. And if I go all the way, it's going to sound like that. And already, we kind of start getting something cool. And we are following this. So I'm going to go all the way down in this one and go to the sustain all the way up. And as soon as we do it, if I do some modulation right here, we are going to be starting that kind of a classic oscillator, oscillator sync sound. And remember that kind of offsetting this, or just, going to different ranges, is going to give you different tones, especially when you combine this with maybe something like this. Right? And you can go to extremes. Maybe this one is just too high. Maybe this one, okay. If I disable the sync, it's just gonna sound a little bit weird because what we are doing, we are detuning the oscillator number 2. Totally different, right? Right, so that's the classic oscillator sync sound that we can do with this synthesizer. So I'm going to go back to an init patch, starting right from the scratch, and we have an oscillator number 1. We kind of already know this one. We have an oscillator number 2. We already know this one, but we have a noise generator. If I go and enable this, this is just noise. So if I play something, whatever, we are just going to be getting noise. So you can go up in level of the noise, or you can go down and you can go to the left, or you can go to the right. I feel like I don't need to explain this, but the color is just going to give you different ranges or different, types of noise. So if you go all the way down, notice that we have kind of a slope right here. So we are cutting the highs and we get more of this section. So this is kind of usually called kind of a brown noise or pink noise, something like that, because it's darker. But as you go up, we start cutting here and we start cutting here, so we have a kind of a band pass. And as we keep going up, we get a very aggressive cut right here at the bottom, and we get only the higher part, which is going to be very noisy. So it depends on what you want to do, what you're designing with, which sound. This is something very useful to have. So I will go to an init patch right again. And we need to start talking about how the amp works, the amp envelope. So since I know that you might be starting on this synthesizer, this is kind of your first synthesizer, or I'm assuming that maybe, I'm going to be explaining how the ADSR works. If you already know how ADSR works, you can skip this section because this is pretty obvious to you. So the amp envelope, what will do, it will control the volume, how the volume of the synthesizer goes out. Right now, it's just pretty loud. It's just not doing anything. We play a key and maximum volume right away. So what I will do, I will go all the way down on this knobs right here. So what we are pretty much saying is that we don't have an attack, a decay, or a sustain, or release to control how the volume of the synthesizer or how the sound goes out. So if I play a key, nothing is going to happen. Right? We get nothing. And it's because we have no instruction right here. So we are saying that everything is super fast and super short. So ADSR, it stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. The A is going to be a time knob. And notice that it says milliseconds. The decay is a time knob. it's milliseconds. The sustain is a value. It's on dBs. You can see it right there. And then the release is going to be a time kind of a knob. So how this works is that when we work with attack, what this will mean when we play a key, this will decide how the sound goes up in volume, right? It's going to shape the volume. So it's going to be very aggressive, or it's going to kind of slowly ramp up. Now, if I play a key right now, maybe I'm going to do something like that. Maybe I'm going to do something like, you can go all the way and it's 20 seconds, which is a lot. So I can do maybe 1 second. So this means when I play a key, the sound will take a second, about a second to go up in volume. And we can see it right here on the spectrum. It's going to go up and then it's going to die. Now, if I make it really slow, like 2 seconds, it's going to slowly go up. And at some point, it's going to die. So the question is why it's dying. So this is how a DSR works. When we have some attack, we're just saying, okay, so go up in volume, this fashion and this slow. But then when you reach the maximum peak, it's going to go all the way down because we have 0 right here as a value. So how we go down in volume is going to be the decay. So I'm going to do maybe around pretty much the same, maybe a second or something. And this is the shape of how we're shaping the volume. That's why this envelope is a very kind of a visual representation of what you're doing. We go slowly up and then we go slowly down. So if I play a key, it's going to go up and then we're going to slowly go back to silence. Maybe not so slowly, maybe 3 seconds. It's going to be a little bit more obvious. We go up, we reach maximum point and then we slowly fade the sound out. Now, what happens if we are sustaining a key? We don't want for this sound to die. So that's going to be the sustain. Now, the sustain is not a time knob. It's not going to decide how much time we are going to be sustaining. That's something that you decide when you press and hold the key. So if I press and hold, and you can see right here that I'm pressing and holding a key, I'm still holding, but we have no sustain, so the sound is dying. So the sustain is going to decide where we want to stay in between when we hold the key. Right now, it's nothing, so it's full silence. But if I go up, the sound is going to be staying somewhere in between right here, between the maximum peak and the lowest. So if I play a key, it's going to go up, and it's going to go down following the decay. But it's going to be super slow because we have a very slow value. Maybe I'm going to go with something short, maybe a second or something like that. And I'm going to do less release, maybe something like that. So it's going to go up. Then it's going to go down following the decay, but it will not go to full silence because I'm holding a key and we are sustaining it at this point. Now I can go even lower on the sustain, and this, if I play again, this should go lower, maybe something about there. But it is going lower, maybe not there, maybe just do right there. So the sound goes up, goes down, and then it's going to sustain at some point, and it's sustaining on a very kind of a low volume. So that's the whole point of the sustain. And every envelope and on different synthesizers work on a different way. It just works in different ways. So it goes up, goes slowly down, and then it's going to sustain at some point. Now, you always need to know that when you go to the sustain all the way up, it means that you're disabling the decay stage. There's no decay. It's going to go up and stay there at the very top as long as you're sustaining a key. Now, when I release the key, it's going to go to false silence right away. Why is that? And it's because we don't have a release. We are saying 0 milliseconds. It's kind of a, nothing, super fast. So release, it means what is going to happen when you release the keys. That's why it's called release. So if I do some timing, maybe like a second, or maybe not that much, yeah, maybe like a second. Now, when I hold the key, it's going to go right there at the very top. And maybe let me do some values like this. It's going to go up, slowly up. Then it's going to enter the decay stage. It's going to go down a little bit. It's going to sustain right here. And now if I release the key, it's just slowly fading away. The other way is just not happening. As soon as I release the keys, it's just kind of a dying right away. And this is, of course, depends on what you want to do. Maybe you want a very long release, and you can go again to 30 seconds, which is a lot. But maybe just 2 seconds, it's gonna give you that release that you want. Now, also, when you go, I'm going to go all the way up on the sustain and maybe not so much with the release, something like that. Notice that you have these points. So these are your curves. You can make it linear or exponential, and this will affect how it goes up in volume in this case. Notice that it's kind of a very slow at the beginning, and then it's fast at the end. And the other way, if I grab this and go the other way, it's going to be very fast at the beginning and then kind of a slowly go right here at this point. Let me go kind of all the way down right here. Just different curves. Notice it's very slow and then it goes a little bit faster. And the other way, it's just completely different. So you need to use all these tools, everything that you have available, and notice that you can drag the points, which is very useful. You can use all of these tools to kind of shape how the sound goes out. And this is something very important that you need to use the whole time. You know, it's pretty basic to all synthesis. Right now, we need to talk about the filter. Now, the filter, it's a pretty cool thing. And then we're going to discuss the character and the modulations and everything we have right here. And then the envelopes, how we can modulate the cutoff with the envelope we have right here. So, okay, so the filter is a very simple filter. Now, if you go to an init patch, there is no modulation, there is nothing. This envelope, it's not modulating the cutoff. Right? So if I play something, nothing happens. We're going to discuss how we can make this work. So if I play something, the cutoff, what it will do, we'll just cut frequencies. In this case, we are going to be cutting high frequencies, and we can see how we are cutting right there at the top. Right. So you have different types of filters. You have a low pass. In this case, it's going to be a 24 ladder filter. And then you have a zero. And then if you're asking or wondering what is this, it's just a different variation of a filter, analog filter. This is what it says on the manual, of course. Now, let me just play a different key. So they are just a little bit different, especially when we talk about the resonance, but we're going to talk about that in a second. Now, the next one is going to be the same filter, but it's less aggressive. It's a 12 dB per octave. Then what we get is a band pass. And the band pass, what it does, a difference for the other ones, with this one we cut the high frequencies. With the band pass, what we do is kind of a curve right here. We're cutting highs, we're cutting lows, and we have a bump right here. Now we cannot see it because the band pass kind of works with the resonance. So since we have a peak right here, notice that we are kind of sweeping, but we have a kind of this bump right here at the middle. If I go to the other way, we are just chopping high frequencies. So that's why you get the shape right like that. You know, we are getting less of this, less of that, and more of the middle. And then what you get is the other thing, which is going to be your high pass. So the high pass is going to cut, lows. So right now, if we go all the way down, we get the full spectrum. But if I start cutting, notice that we cut the low frequencies. Right, so you get all of these tools to shape your sound. So now we need to talk about the resonance, and the resonance, what it is a peak at the breakpoint. So right now, if I cut some, and I'm going to use 0 because I like it. So I'm going to be right there. So we know that we are cutting right here. So the resonance will give you a pronunciation, kind of a peak at the breakpoint, which is this right here. So when you do resonance, you're going to be getting kind of this sound, especially when you modulate the cutoff. The classic, sweep sound. And here comes the difference between the oscillators. They're going to sound a little bit different. Notice that this is a little bit more resonant and the other one is just not that resonant. They're different. All right. In this case, I like this one more. Now, so we are getting that peak on the breakpoint, and we expose it right here. We can see it. And this is going to be important in a second. So one of the main things with the filters is that you need to modulate them, or you get a lot of options to modulate the filter with your velocities, with your keys, or with an envelope. So I'm gonna be standing maybe around here, so we can see the peak. Nah, maybe around there. So we can see the peak right here. We can actually, hear it and see it. It's gonna be like there, right? So we know this. So why do we get a velocity and a key? So the velocity is going to listen to your keys, whatever is that you're playing. And if you play soft, the cutoff, or the cutoff will be adjusted to the velocity of what you're playing, up or down. So we can go up in this one, and maybe I'm gonna go all the way up. So if I play soft, we get that peak right here. Now, if I play hard, notice that we get it on a different place. And right now, I'm pressing really hard. So this one is listening to your velocity and it's scaling the position of your cutoff. So now, the cutoff is all the way up. So we can see the resonance right there. But if I play soft, the velocity is just, less. So we modulate less. So if you play your keys kind of on different velocity, this is going to be kind of be playing on different places. Now, right now, I'm going very aggressive. So you can just, do a little bit. It depends on how hard you press the keys. You're going to start getting it on different points, right? That's the whole trick. Now you can go the other way, which is going to be completely the opposite. Instead of going up, which is what we are doing right here with the velocities going up, we are going to be going the other way, the negative ways, to negative values. So we're going to go down. So I need to go up just to get that. And notice if I start tapping my keys, and I do with different intensity, we are just going to be getting different sounds. So that's the point of the velocity. It will alter your cutoff depending on how hard you hit the keys. So then you have the key. So this is called key tracking. Now, key tracking, what it does is going to, instead of listening for the velocity of your keys, is going to listen to your keys, to which, whatever value you're playing. If you're playing a low C or you're playing a high C or whatever frequency you're playing on the keys, it's going to listen to that and it's going to scale the cutoff. And this is actually pretty easy to see. I'm going to be standing right about there. Right here, we can see the peak. Maybe I'm going to go to this one. So we can see the peak right here. Now I'm going to start playing low notes and I'm going to do it with the mouse so you can see it. So I'm going to play a low key and I'm going to go up. I want you to follow the peak of our resonance. Notice that it's always staying on the same place. Even if I go to higher keys, it's just kind of not moving. And at some point, we are playing a lot of higher keys and we cannot hear the higher pitch. We can hear clearly the low keys, but not so much of the highs. They're going to go up on the cutoff. So the peak is not moving. So the key tracking, what it will do, it will listen to whatever is that you're playing. So if you're playing a low key, the cutoff is going to be right here, maybe, just to give you an example. But if you're playing high keys, the cutoff is going to open a little bit more, so you're going to be able to hear the higher notes. So if I go up on the key tracking, I'm going to go all the way up right now. And I want you to do the same thing. I want you to look at the peak. So if I play something, the peak, right now, it's not on the same spot. It's really low. It's right here. And if we start playing up, notice that the peak right now, it's moving. So this means that when we play different keys, the cutoff, it's being adjusted to whatever pitch we are playing. So now if I go to higher keys, we can hear them. If I go all the way down in the key, we just, cannot hear them. The only thing we are hearing is the resonance right here. So again, very different thing. So if you're playing something, you're chopping a lot of frequencies, and when you go to a different keys, you cannot hear them because you're just cutting a lot. Adjusting your key tracking is going to be very useful. Notice that right now, since we don't have the resonance, the bump, we cannot hear the higher keys, but we hear the low keys because we are not cutting them. So the key tracking is going to fix that. We can hear the higher keys and then the lower keys as well. Right, so that's the whole point of the key tracking. So with analog synthesizers, with your filter, you always get a little bit of overdrive. So this is kind of an emulation of that. Some synths you don't get them; it's kind of a built within. But some synthesizers let you drive your filters. So if I play something and maybe adjust something like that, and I go up on the drive, this is just gonna drive the filter, and this is gonna take you to different places. And this is how it's kind of it reaches the upper part and then it's kind of a bending right here. So that's it. We are driving. We are introducing overdrive or distortion in this case. Now, it depends on what you're doing. This is just going to sound very different. So then you have this soft and the not and the soft on and the soft off. So this is what it means and what it says on the manual, especially when you're using the resonance, because you can hear it a little bit better. The soft is a different emulation of this filter. It's a variation of the filter of whatever it is that you're doing right here. So when soft is on, it means that it's going to be darker or warm sounding, and when it's off, it's just going to be brighter. Maybe we can kind of see that right here. It's kind of a changing nature. Let's drive it. This is just a little bit different. The difference is not a lot. And again, it's always depending on what you're doing. So, right. So then you have something very uncommon for all synthesizers. You have the punch. So you don't get this on most synthesizers. So the punch, what it is, I'm going to go all the way down to resonance, and I'm going to go right there. The punch, in this case, is going to be a very kind of a abrupt rise in volume. So it's going to give you a transient at the beginning. So if you're playing some keys, something like that, and of course, this is kind of a super dark, super, not very noticeable. And if you put this on a mix, maybe it's not going to stand out. But if you go up on the punch, this is kind of give you that transient at the beginning, and we can actually hear that. Maybe I'm going to go right there. If I go all the way down to the punch, it's just different, right? And we can see it right here on the oscilloscope that is going kind of a really up in volume and then going down. So what you get is a very short kind of a, punch. It's a very short kind of a transient at the very beginning of what you're playing or not. So on this synthesizer, the envelope number 2 is kind of the default associated to modulate the cutoff. And you can go to the modulation matrix. Notice that maybe if you go right here at the bottom, if you don't get it, you are going to be watching some of the options, seeing one of the options. The mod A, it's already kind of wired right here. It gives you this information. It says envelope number 2. This one, it's connected to modulate the filter cutoff. So it's using this one, but if you want, you can change it and use maybe the envelope number 3 or something else, whatever you want. And this is something very cool that you get on this synthesizer. On some synthesizers, you cannot choose what is going to be your main modulation, which envelope, or maybe no envelope. So this one you can, and this is the way you do it. So we get a very standard kind of a ADSR right here. So I'm going to be playing a key, and right now we are just not doing anything. Let me just play this one, right? Okay, so we get that. So what I want to do, every time I play a key, I want to do up and down. So we do it with the ADSR. Right now we have all decay. So if I do something, we get nothing, but maybe if I do a little bit of attack, this is just going to go up like that. So if I play it, nothing is going to happen. Why? Because if we go right here at the bottom, we are saying do nothing. So we need to decide how much of this effect we want. You can go very little, or you can go all the way up. It's going to be a much more aggressive kind of a modulation. We can go up on the values, and it's going to be a second. So there we go, and we can see it right here. It's going to kind of start from a point and go all the way up. And we go all the way down because we don't have any values. How slowly we're going to go back there? Well, we need to decide it with the decay. And we can adjust, of course, the values right there. And then at some point, it's just going to be going back. And it's really slow because we have something slow. So then you have your sustain. Maybe I'm going to put it right here. So we go up. We're going to go down, but we are sustaining at some point. And when I release the keys, since I have no release, maybe going to do it like that. I'm going to be releasing it. And if I release it, we have nothing. So the release is going to decide how slowly we enter that modulation. Maybe the release, I need more release. There we go. So you can use your envelope number 2 to decide how you're going to be doing that modulation of going up and down and so on and so on. Now you have one more cool feature, which is going to be the delay. So this one is going to delay the envelope from executing whatever motion you want to do right here by some amount of seconds. Let's say that it's going to wait for 1.8 seconds before this kicks in. So if I play a key, nothing happens, and after 1.8 seconds it's going to happen. Notice I'm holding it. Now I have aftertouch on this keyboard, and this is just going to modulate it with the aftertouch by default. So that's the main problem. So I'm going to go all the way down on the aftertouch. So it's going to go up after 2 seconds, and then it's going to do whatever we indicated on this one. So that's how you're going to be able to modulate the cutoff. Right, so I'm going to be starting on a default patch again, and we need to discuss the character. So this is something very cool, a not so classic feature that you get on this synthesizer. So what this is essentially is a wave shaper, and it kind of changes how it sounds. It's going to mess with your waveform and your sound. Now you have a lot of different options. If you go to the manual of this synthesizer, on Studio One manual, it will give you a reference, a tiny, very tiny, not super descriptive reference to all of this, but there's a difference between all of them. They are kind of a different. The first three, this one, and this one, are kind of a mild shapers. These ones are more formant, and the other ones are different harmonical shapers. We're going to talk about them. So it depends on what you're doing. Maybe I'm going to do something like that. And I'm going to be going to the aftertouch and disable it for now. So that's the sound we get, something very simple. Right. So the character will just mess with the sound as soon as you turn it on. Notice that we are not doing anything. So you have two different options, which all of this, options, wave shapers that you have right here. The amount is how much you're doing. If I go all the way down, we are not doing anything. If we go all the way up, we are doing the full of the character. And this is kind of a modifying how this sounds. So the amount is how much we do or we affect the sound. Now then the sound depends on which option you have selected. Is going to be, you can kind of make a blend or select a different variation of whatever shaper you're using right here. So you can go with this and it's going to shape it on a different way, or you can go the other way and it's going to shape it on a different way. And depends on what you're doing. So the first three ones, the Grand Class, the Ardency, and the Bass Modulator, they are mild shapers. They will kind of affect the color of whatever it is that you're doing more than, all the things. So they are very mild. So also, a cool thing that you can do is to attach or maybe modulate some of these params just to get something else. So the other one is just going to be a little bit different. That is how it's shaping it. And then the other one, so they are, they do different things. They just shape the sound in a different way. Right. So the first three shapers are very mild. Now the next ones, this one, the character saw, the sub box, the talkie, and this one, the box 2 or box II, they are formant shapers. So they sound a little bit different. And notice that they kind of sound a little bit vocal. We have that kind of a vocal sound, and this is kind of the main vibe of this ones. Now, right here, the magic starts to happen when you modulate or move or select the sound, or even when you start modulating it. And we could, of course, go to the matrix and modulate the sound with some of the LFOs and get, really cool sounds. So they are all very different. They do different things. And you go to this one, just a little bit more annoying, let's say. Right. So these ones are formant shapers. Now the other ones, they are harmonical shapers. And again, they are all very different. Now a cool kind of improvement that we could ask to Studio One is to kind of on this sub menu to make a difference between them all. Just, to kind of quickly know what they are. So this one, again, from AMPOG and so on until we get to the last one, they are harmonical shapers. And they're all shapers, but they work in a different way. So these ones are just better used when we use a complex sound. If I use something very dull, like we have right now, we are going to be shaping it, of course, But it's just, we don't get kind of a super cool sound. But they all do different things, especially, when we go to different ones. You can hear the difference, but the difference is not, super awesome. So all of the shapers are going to be reactive to whatever sound you have right here. So if you have something very dull, like we have right now, they're not going to give us a lot, but as soon as we kind of bring more things to the table, an oscillator, maybe with a sub, maybe with a different saw, and maybe with something else, they're just going to start, to react on a very different way. That is how different they are. If I go all the way up, if I go to the other one, yeah, I don't like this talking one, but maybe this one. Right, so this is the character, and it's something very, very useful that you don't get on a lot of synthesizers. And with this one, it requires for you to do a little bit of experimentation to kind of make your sound, and then just go to the character and see if you can get something cool out of this. And you always, will want to use it because it's something very useful. But it will require for you to do some experimentation. So the LFOs are pretty much the same. You get the LFO 1 and the LFO 2, and they are just exactly the same. So by learning the number 1, you're going to be learning the number 2. Now, right now, on a default patch on init, I'm going to be disabling the aftertouch for now. They are not connected to anything. So it doesn't matter what you do right here. They are not going to modulate anything. So you need to manually connect them. So you need to go right here to the mod matrix and say, okay, I'm going to be using the LFO number 1 to modulate what? So I'm going to be going here and selecting something. In this case, I'm going to do the cutoff because we can really hear what's going on when we modulate the cutoff. I'm going to be cutting some frequencies and doing a little bit of resonance and going to this one because I like it. Right, and maybe a little bit of drive, why not? So right now we are saying, okay, I want to modulate the cutoff with the LFO 1, but nothing is happening. And it's because, remember, we need to do this. We need to decide how much of the LFO we want to use in order to modulate this. And if I go all the way up, nothing is happening. And it's because the LFO, it's super slow. If I go all right here, it says is on 0.01 hertz, and that is just slow, way too slow. And we can see it changing right here, very slowly. So the rate is going to decide how fast the modulation will be. Now, of course, if you don't like to use it on hertz, you can sync it to your tempo, your DAW tempo. So you go into subdivisions mode. So pretty useful and pretty simple. So we can go fast or we can go slow-ish. So how the modulation will happen is, of course, if you don't care about this, we're going to talk about all these features. You're going to be going right here, and we are not syncing it. Then we have this one, which is the delay. We're going to discuss this one in a minute. But first, we need to discuss the waveforms that you have right here. So you can do a sine wave, which is going to be an up and down, something like this, smooth up and smooth down. Then you have your saw. So the saw is going to look something like this. Something like this. It's going to start abruptly and then smooth, abruptly and smooth. Then you have your triangle, and the triangle is kind of a close to the sine wave, and it's going to look something like this. It smooths up and then smooth down, but the motion is linear, not linear. It's not something, something like that, which is we have rounded corners. It's just more linear. Okay. And then you have your square, and this one looks like this one, and it's kind of an on and off motion, right? Pretty standard. Then you have your random, And if you hover on top of this, it's not going to say random, it's going to say sample and hold. Now, sample and hold, it's something that we get on kind of all synthesizers. It's something that we've been getting for ages, and it's a way of generating a random instruction. And we take tiny samples from a source like noise. Usually, noise could be whatever you want, but usually it's noise, because noise is an uncontrollable or kind of an unpredictable sound source. So we take samples from noise and we get this random kind of a sound. And notice that we cannot predict where it's going to be going. I'm gonna go a little bit faster, and it's going to start doing this modulation, but it happens on a random fashion. Okay, so we need to talk about this, and this is very special. I'm going to be going out of sync. I'm going to go in hertz, and maybe I'm going to be using maybe a triangle, because we can really hear how it works. So the delay works just like the delay we have right here. Maybe when we play a key, we don't want to start the modulation right away. I want to wait for a certain amount of time. If you go to sync, this is going to be synced as well. But if I do something like this, we're going to go in seconds. So maybe we can go up to 2 seconds. So this means that this is going to wait for 2 seconds before the modulation kicks in. So I'm going to play a key, we get nothing, and after 2 seconds, the modulation will begin. So it's kind of a wait 2 seconds or wait a certain amount of time before doing the modulation. Pretty easy. Okay, I'm going to go down on the delay, and maybe I'm going to be going to a square, and I'm going to be going right here. So you have this option called free, and if you hold it, maybe you hover, and it's going to say disable note sync start. What the F does this mean? So when I play a key, and I'm going to be doing it, I want you to watch right here at the bottom. So what we are doing, we are pretty much, of course, modulating the cutoff in some fashion. So when I play a key, maybe I'm going to go right there, or maybe I'm going to go slower. There we go. So it's going to go up and down. We can hear it. It's going off and on, because we are using a pulse. So with the free, what it means is that every time I play it, it will not restart the waveform of the LFO. And as I'm kind of tapping this, and we have no way of controlling how the waveform restarts. And right here you get a light. So this indicator is telling you how the waveform is kind of moving. And it doesn't care if I start pressing a key or I, press it several times. It doesn't care. It will always follow the same motion. It will never restart. That's why it's free. It will not restart even if I play a new key. But if I disable this, when I play a key, it's going to restart. So now, when I play a key, notice, and this is kind of something not very representative of what we are doing, notice that we get a different sound. Every time I play it, it will always start from the beginning of the waveform. That's why when I tap this, we get always nothing, because this is starting right from the beginning, right here of the waveform. And if I go to free and keep tapping, sometimes it's going to be going high and sometimes it's going to be going low. Same thing with the other waveforms. I'm going to keep tapping, and sometimes we're going to be catching it up, sometimes we're going to be catching it down. It's free. But if I disable this, it will always start from the same place. So this depends on what you want to do is useful, because maybe you want to run a modulation and you're playing several keys, or you're playing very kind of fast, and you cannot control how the modulation is kicking in because you start from different places. But if you disable the free, you will always start from the same place. Notice this always sounds the same. Now if I enable this, sometimes it's going to start at the beginning, sometimes it's going to be starting on the middle. Depends on where the waveform is. Now this is a bug, I believe, because when we disable this one should be showing when we are starting on the waveform, but Okay, so that's what the free means. So if I hover this, it's going to say key scaling. What the F does this mean? So this is going to scale the speed of your LFO depending on which key you're playing. And for now, I'm going to be kind of enabling, or maybe I'm just going to go right here and maybe go right here. And I'm going to use my mouse. I'm going to play a lower key, and we can hear the sound, it's pretty much the same. The modulation, the rate is pretty much the same. And if I go up on the keys, it doesn't matter. It's always the same rate. And I'm gonna go to 3 in this case. It's always the same. So it doesn't care which key I'm playing. It's always the same speed. Even if I go to higher keys. But if we enable this, now the frequency of what we are playing right here is going to scale the rate. So if I play low keys, it's going to go slower. And if I go higher keys, actually it's going to go to this rate. But as I go higher on the keys, it's going to start going faster. So that's what the key means. It's going to scale the speed if you play higher keys. Super fast, slow, fast, and slow. Right? So yeah, that's what this means. So the LFO number two works exactly the same than the number 1. So once you learn this, you know how to use this one. So on the global, you get your volume. Pretty simple. I feel like I don't need to explain it right here. You're going to go down, you're going to go up in volume, right? So then you have your velocity. So remember we discussed the velocity for the filter? Right? You know, we are going to be modulating this. It's going to go up or down depending on how hard we hit the keys, you know, the velocity of the keys. So this one, it's pretty much the same, but this one will modulate the volume, which means the amp. So right now, if it's all the way down, it doesn't care if I play soft or play hard. It just doesn't care. Now, if I go all the way up, this is going to be, or maybe even some betweens, it's going to be completely different. I play soft and we get a pretty much nothing. Notice that the volume is super low. We can see there's something going on right here, but it's super low in volume. Now, if I play a little bit harder, it's going to go up in volume. And if I play hard, my velocity is going to scale whatever, you know, the volume, how the volume goes out. Right. So soft, mid, well, maybe mid, and then hard. Right. So this is what the velocity will do. This is a polyphonic instrument, polyphonic synthesizer. You get poly, which means that you can play many keys at the same time. If I play 1, I play 2, I play 3, I play 4, we can do it. Now, of course, you have your voices right here. You can go up to 32 voices, which means that you can play 32 keys, but no one will do something like that. But you can decide how many voices you want to use. So this is completely up to you. So you need to remember that, let's say that I will select 4 different voices. It means I can play 4 keys at the same time. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4, right? Okay. So what happens if I play a 5th? 2, 3, 4. Let me just read it correct. I'm using a pad right now. You know, the Atom SQ, and I'm in a weird position, but yeah. So I'm holding 4 different keys. What is going to happen if I start pressing other keys? So I'm going to be doing it right now. Right. Notice what is going on. We hear the higher keys, not the lower keys anymore, because we can only do 4 at the same time. So if I'm playing 4 keys and then I replace and I play other keys, it's going to dispose these ones. So what it's doing note stealing, which is something very cool. Some synthesizers can do it, some other synths cannot. This one will steal your voices. So if you're holding or reaching your threshold, whatever new keys will be stolen from the ones you were playing before. That's what it means. If you want to play more keys or a lot of keys at the same time, you just go up in the amount of voices. So then you have your mono. And your mono, it means that you cannot use voices. You can do only one single voice at a time. So 1 key, and then if I play a new key, you cannot, hold 2 keys at the same time. The new one is going to dispose the one you played before. Right? And is that I'm holding it and I play the new key, it's killing this one. And if I release the new one, it doesn't matter, I'm holding this one. It's still not going to play it because, it was killed. But how this works is last no priority. the last note I play is going to be the one playing. It doesn't matter if it's lower or it's going to be higher. And that's called last note priority. Cool. So when you go to mono, you're going to see that the glide turns on. So you can do glide, but this only works in mono mode. On some other synthesizers, you can do glide on poly, and this will give you, some other features that maybe we could get on the synthesizer in the future because we can modulate the voices on a different way. But in this case, you cannot do it. You only get the glide for mono. Now, if I play a key and I go all the way up on the glide and I play a new key or just play keys, nothing is going to happen because the glide needs to be turned on. Still, if I play a key, we are not getting the glide. Now, on different synthesizers, it depends on the synth. The glide always works on a different way, and the way that this works is that it's works on legato mode, let's say. So I need to hold key in order to do that glide and hear that sweep. But I always need to hold the key, and when I play a new one, it's going to glide to that new note. That's the way it works. If you're not holding a key, it will not do any glide. You need to hold key. That's how it works. So I'm going to disable this. I don't want to use the glide. I'm going to go to poly and keep it on, 23, maybe 6 or 10 voices. 10 voices is fine. We need to talk about this, the quality. Now you have 4 different options, and of course you go low is less quality, and then supreme is going to be more quality. Now the difference between all of them is that the modulations and the sound and pretty much the envelopes and everything is going to be a little bit more precise. So it's going to consume a lot less, and you can actually hear this. You can actually see this. I'm gonna maybe go to a spread right here. Maybe someday I'm going to do character. I'm just going to force this. Maybe oscillator 2 as well. I'm going to go low in volume and I don't know, something like that. I'm not going to use a modulation. But right here, what you get on Studio One is that you can see how much consumption of your synthesizer you're doing. Right now, we are on the 80s. So we are consuming between 1 and 2. As I keep going up, notice that it's less dark. If I go to the 80s, it's dark. If I go to normal, it's brighter. And if I go to high, it's not brighter or supreme, it's not brighter, but it's going to consume a little bit more. So this means that everything that we have right here is just a little bit more precise, the envelopes and everything else. So supreme is consuming, if I'm holding 3 keys and using Unison and doing, a couple things, almost 6. And if I go to normal, it's consuming between 1 and 2. But notice it sounds a little bit darker. It sounds a little bit different. So this depends on what you want to do. Maybe you want to use your synthesizer, and when you need to punch in, or maybe just record it or convert it to audio, you can go to Supreme and, then render your audio and then use the audio source. But yeah, normally choosing the quality will change the sound, but also change the performance. So I'm starting on an initial patch, and we need to discuss the mod matrix, and I feel like we don't need to discuss this because we already talked about this throughout the whole guide. So you have 16 different slots, and they are assignable. By default, you get your envelope 2 connected to the filter. So if you want to do something, you need to decide how much of your whatever envelope that you're doing you want to do. The mod wheel is going to be connected to the cutoff. So right now, if I go to the mod and I go up, it's just going to make it darker or make it brighter. And also you get your aftertouch. In this case, I don't want to use it. But you can do whatever you want. Maybe go to the LFOs, connect the LFO, and then say, dude, I want to modulate, I don't know, the oscillator number 1 pan. And I want to do it with an LFO. Right? Maybe I want to use the LFO number 2 and do, I don't know, maybe the character. And I'm going to be modulating that sound that we have right here. So the LFO number 2 will modulate that, that value. We're going to do it we do this, and we are pretty much doing something like this. If I go faster, and notice that you can get really cool sounds just by doing a very mild, very dumb kind of a modulation. So you have two sources, which means that you can combine the LFO maybe with an envelope, or maybe combine the LFO 1 with the number 2, and this will give you different textures. And you have a lot of destination. Maybe you want to do aftertouch. Depends on the patch. This is something that, is really cool. And you want to modulate, I don't know. Let me just do something that we can really hear. Maybe the pitch of the number 1. Right now I'm pressing really hard, and if I play very softly. And if you don't know how aftertouch works, it's something that when you play something and you apply more pressure, it's going to run a modulation. And I can go really up. Right, so that's the mod matrix, and you have 16 of this. So you can go crazy. You can go crazy and just create crazy sounds like this one. Right, so starting from a default patch, now we need to discuss the FXA and the FXB. Now this is pretty simple. Now, maybe you didn't notice that right here you have two buttons. On this one you can hide the keyboard, and on this one you can hide the matrix and the effects. Okay, but now, since we are starting from a default patch, I'm going to disable the aftertouch, and I'm going to be talking about the FXA. So you have two rows with different types of effects. I'm not going to explain in depth all the different knobs, because I believe that this guide is already kind of long enough, but I'm going to give you a demonstration of what they do. Now, this first one is very simple. It's just very, very simple. You get a chorus, you get a flanger, and then you get a phaser. Right? Pretty simple, kind of a different effects. If you go up in depth, you're gonna get more chorus, less chorus, and so on. I believe I don't need to explain it. You can make it mono. Then you have a flanger. It's just a flanger, and then a phaser. Now, very cool effects. Now, they're not very specific, very simple effects. I'm gonna move on to the next one, and I'm gonna be talking about the delay. And you might be thinking, with this reverb, it means that we are doing reverb. Well, we are not. I'm going to be talking about this in a minute. So the delay is very simple. It's just a simple delay. If I go all the way up, we can hear the repetitions. You have your feedback control, which is going to be how many repetitions you're going to be doing, how fast you're going to be going. Right? And then maybe I'm going to leave it right there. If you want to cut the lows and you want to cut the highs of the repetitions, pretty simple. Now, this option right here, it means that you can use the features of panning, which is a ping pong, but they are a little bit different. So panned, it means ping pong. So then you get your dotted, which is the same thing, but the ping pong is going to be a little bit different. Right, so maybe gonna go up in volume. Right, and then you get the double, and maybe you're thinking, okay, we get that same ping pong effect. And you need to use good headphones right here. And I'm gonna go higher in pitch. So what is the difference between double and panned? If I go all the way down on the feedback, and I go to panned, I play it, and the feedback, the repetition is gonna be just once. Notice that we get the repetition just once. But if I go to the double, it's going to double that, and it's going to do it on left and right. So that's the main difference. Of course, you need to use them well, do whatever it is that you want to do right here, and then, of course, the delay is going to go out. If you're not using a reverb, it's just going to go out. Now, then you have the reverb, and in this case, I'm going to turn this on and turn this one off, and you get a nice reverb. Pretty simple. Right. Okay, so the reverb is just a reverb. But when you use it with the delay, there's kind of a weird relationship right here. Now, the delay goes out in parallel with the reverb. So if I play something, And maybe I'm going to go up on the feedback. Notice that we can hear the delay very clearly, and it's because the delay is running in parallel with the reverb. It's not that the delay is going into the reverb. So we are not hearing the repetitions of the reverb. Right? It's just one single sound on the reverb. Now, if I enable this, the delay is feeding into the reverb. So the repetitions and the whole overall sound is going to be going through the reverb. So now the repetitions are going into the reverb. And we hear the repetitions with the reverb sound are being reverberated. Right? So that's how the reverb sounds with the delay. Pretty simple. I'm going to go to the next one, the FXB. And this one is pretty cool. Now, you get the gator. Now, gator, what it will do, will go up and down in volume. How aggressive? Well, right here you have the depth, and by default it's 90%, but you can go all the way down or maybe do something like this. And in this case, just to show you how this works, I'm going to go all the way up. So this one, what it will do, it will go up in volume and down in volume, and you have kind of a step sequencer right here. So maybe I'm going to turn this off, and off, and I'm going to do something kind of a weird. And if I play something and sustain it, it's going to be kind of going up and down in volume. How fast? Well, it's the whole cycle. How fast is going to complete the cycle? Well, it's going to be the gator. Maybe I'm going to go something slow. And what this is doing is going up and down in volume. If I go and disable all of them, we are going to be getting no sound because all the steps are silenced. But if I enable one, the whole cycle is going to play one on this position and this position, and so on, and so on, and so on. You have different presets. Maybe something like that. I'm going to be doing a little bit of resonance. And again, you go... We have different kind of templates, let's say templates. But that's what you do. Now, if you want, you can go not to 100% and do a little bit less. And it's not going to go, off and on with the volume. It's just going to be doing a little bit less. Then you have the stereo. The stereo, it means that it's going to treat or go up and down in volume differently on the left and the right side in the channel. So if you have the same, it's just going to be the same. But if I start kind of just changing this and do it differently, now we can hear that the on and off kind of a vibe is going to be a little bit different on the left and the right. Right? And you need to use good headphones. Now, if I enable the delay and enable the reverb, we could get, a really cool sound. Right. So this is what the gator is going to do. Now, for now, I'm just going to turn it off, and I'm going to be going to the EQ. Now, this is just an EQ with different bands. It's pretty simple. I'm going to go right here, and we're going to boost, and right there, it says where you're boosting on the 3.2K, then 1.6K, and 800 Hertz. And you just can do the EQ, your normal EQing right here. The only confusing thing is going to be the lead and the bass. What is the difference, between them? So, bass is going to be a wider Q, and lead is a narrow Q. If you don't know what Q is when you create a point, for example, and I'm going to show you right here on the Pro Q, doing a bell, for example, which is what we are doing right here. Now, the Q could be wide or it could be narrow. See, if I go here and I make it wide, this is going to be a wide Q. Actually, it's a super wide Q. And if I go narrow, this is a narrow Q, super narrow Q. So, since we cannot manage how wide the Q is, you get two different profiles. The bass is going to be a little bit wider, and the lead is going to be a little bit narrower. So, if I go to lead, notice the sound is just changing just a little bit, and it's because it's wide and it's just more narrow. Notice we get a peak right here on this one. Maybe I'm gonna peak. I'm gonna do something like that so we can see it on the spectrum. This is the peak. If I go to the bass, it's wider, narrow, wide. And this doesn't mean that this is for leads and this is for basses. It's just different cues. That's all. Then you have a distortion circuit, and it's just distortion. I feel like I don't need to explain it. You have different flavors, from mild to wild. Whoa, that's maybe too much. But it's nice that you get this distortion, and then you get the panning. And this is just going to be a pan. The depth is going to decide how hard you're going to be panning this. If I go all the way up, it's going to go from left to right. Hard left, hard right. You can go in free mode. Or you can just sync it to whatever you have on your DAW, tempo on your DAW. And that's it pretty much. Of course, you get your band wheel. You're going to go up and down in pitch, and you are going to be deciding right here how much semitones up and how much semitones down. If you do in one octave, up or an octave, up or down. And that's pretty much the whole synthesizer. We are done with this guide. Hopefully you liked all of this. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you really liked it and this was, helpful for you, and maybe you want to buy me a coffee, you can go to the links in the description. You have PayPal, you have Google Thanks now. That button where you can, the Google Thanks. I believe it's called Google Thanks. And then you can join Patreon. If you want to buy me a coffee, maybe you can join Patreon and be a 1-month patron. That will be really cool. Okay, so see you on the next one.